Hey everyone, and welcome to another Sasquatch Theory podcast. In today's interview, we have David Bakara. I think I pronounced it correctly. He is the owner of the Expedition Bigfoot, the Sasquatch Museum in Blue Ridge, Georgia. David wanted to come on the show and talk about his knowledge regarding the Sasquatch and how things are not exactly how we think they are. Is it just an unknown primate, or is there a lot more to this subject than we would like to believe? David became very interested in Bigfoot at a very young age, and throughout his journey, he started to accumulate a ton of reports, and he claims that there is a lot more going on than what people believe, and there are organizations and groups that simply want to make this out to be a primate, and that's just not true. There is a lot more going on, and there's a lot of things that people just don't understand about this subject, and you never really fully understand, but the more you dive into this, the stranger it gets. It's a never-ending rabbit hole, and David wanted to come on the show to talk about these strange occurrences and what real people have actually experienced. Do you believe that this is an undiscovered primate that lives out in the forest throughout the world, or do you think that there is something stranger going on that we are not being told about? If you are interested in learning more about Bigfoot, I highly recommend that you visit the Expedition Bigfoot Museum in Blue Ridge, Georgia, and it's an awesome place to be if you love the cryptid subject. There is a lot of information in there and a lot of things that have been collected throughout the years. I was very fortunate to have visited the Expedition Bigfoot Museum in Blue Ridge, Georgia, and it was really cool to be in there, and I felt like I was in my element. If you guys can, give a special thanks to David Bakara, the owner of the Expedition Bigfoot, the Sasquatch Museum from Blue Ridge, Georgia, here on Sasquatch Theory. All right, David, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very good. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on as a guest. David, if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself and your Bigfoot research, encounters, and experiences from the very beginning, please.
Yeah, I became I became interested in Bigfoot when I was 12 years old, watching all the Bigfoot TV shows. Grew up in Miami, Florida, and I used to see the news, and they would be talking about the Florida skunk ape. And it's funny because I was in right about 12 years old when I was watching the news. And it was about the same time that I was in uh, junior high when they were talking about history, the evolution of man, ancient history, the way it's taught in public schools. And they were talking about the skunk ape being some kind of a giant man. And in school, they're telling me one thing, but on the news, I'm seeing another thing, which kind of contradicted what they were teaching me. At my young age, I was in his big conundrum, like there was conflict. And I think that's part of where I was like starting to doubt the my education and the public domain of information growing up. So, anyways, fast forward, I read everything I could about Bigfoot when I went on a BFRO expedition in Florida, and I had a great time. My brother and I went, and they asked me to become an investigator, so I did, and I started interviewing witnesses, and things changed for me very drastically after about my fourth or fifth investigation because I started hearing strange things that I'd only heard about very rarely on TV or on documentaries, but now I was getting them way more often. So I was hearing things from witnesses that just did not fit into the popular narrative of Bigfoot, and when that's when I became even more interested. Anyways, moved up to North Georgia and opened up a Bigfoot museum, and now we get more reports, and I'm blessed enough to be able to talk to people from all over the country, and sometimes people from other countries come in and tell us their Bigfoot stories. They call us and email us, and we're fortunate to be the largest collector of Bigfoot sighting stories right now, probably in the world.
Okay, very good. And David, if you would, tell me about some of these experiences that have been reported to you. Is this just some lost primate, some lost hominid, or is there something else going on?
Oh, what a great question. I'll tell you, I used to think when I first started this out that it was just a lost, rare primate, just like everybody else. And then, but when I started meeting witnesses and they were started telling me things, and then I started talking to other investigators that were getting the same kind of strange stories all over the country, California, Nevada, Texas, Michigan, Ohio, especially. We started, you know, matching notes, comparing notes, and I'm like, you're getting the same weird thing about glowing red eyes. You're getting the same stories about Bigfoots that were walking in some kind of strange gliding motion, where it looked like they weren't even touching the ground. And so we would uh, we compare notes and realize that these kind of observations weren't rare at all. They were just actually being omitted from the official narrative, and that's exactly what's happening. So after we opened up the museum, really started talking to people, meeting them instead of talking to them on the phone. I got to meet them face to face. They'd come and tell us their Bigfoot stories face to face. We'd sit down in the office, or we'd stand out in the lobby, and they would tell us. Sometimes people would be crying, reliving the fear. And that's a powerful thing when somebody's telling you a story and they start. It could have happened 20 years ago, and the emotion hits them right in the gut again, and they become extremely fearful. Some of them even, like I said, crying while they're telling the story. Grown men, because it was such a terrifying experience. It's a powerful thing, and you pay attention to little details. Um, like it walked behind a tree, and with my buddy and I, both armed, we were hunting, walked behind a tree, and it didn't come out the other end, and we waited and we waited. We thought, well, we'd have seen it walk away. I mean, it wasn't big enough that once it walked away, we should have been able to see it from behind the tree. It just walked behind a tree and never came out. We finally went down there and looked around, and there was nothing. Like, we're like, where did this thing go? I've heard that a couple of times. And so these strange aspects of stories. I tell you, I talked to a fella in, oh my God, I think he was in the Ozarks, might have been Arkansas, that had a terrifying story where he was face to face with a dog man. And even though we're a Sasquatch museum, we take lots of dog man and even some Mothman sightings as well. Most of these are previously unreported anywhere. And I talked to a fellow who was fishing with his brother, and they saw this creature with crouched down, and they thought first it was a wolf or something. It had, I believe, it had glowing eyes, and they said they're looking at it, and then they heard this cracking sound. At first, he thought later that it was branches breaking, but then he said it didn't move. It didn't like shift or anything. It sounded like bones cracking, and then it stood up on two legs, and then it just bent its legs a little bit and then jumped like 20 feet to a little mound, and they watched it do it. And that was terrifying. And then he said later on, he said, I'm not so sure it was twigs cracking. He said, now that I remember, it was more like bones cracking as this thing shifted from on the ground to four legs to being upright on two legs. And that's one of several dogman reports, but most of the things we get are Bigfoot encounters. I talked to a gentleman not too far from Amicalola State Park. A matter of fact, maybe 4 miles, if that, from there in North Georgia. And he was on his back porch having a cigarette early in the morning. And this gentleman was so afraid that I wasn't going to believe his story that he brought his boss with him, so his boss could vouch for him, because what he was about to tell me was so crazy that he wanted a buddy, his friend there, his boss there, he worked for, to vouch that he wasn't insane. He said he got up on the porch, was having a cigarette and a cup of coffee, and he said about 60, 80 feet away from me is a just a little fence. And out of the corner of my eye, I see this moving. I can see this, what I thought was a fellow walking along the fence. But he said, there's really nothing, even though it's not a campground, the area it's coming from isn't near any RVs. And it's moving along the fence, and it's not bouncing, it's just moving in just perfectly level. And he said, as I'm looking at this thing, didn't look at me. As it got closer to where I could see what it was, I realized this thing was a giant hair-covered man, no clothes on. He said, then it came around the fence and came right through the front yard in front of me, never looking at me. And he said, I could see why it wasn't bouncing because this thing was just hovering. It was like about 12 inches off the ground. And he said it wasn't even touching the ground. It just came right across the ground and didn't even look at me. Went across the busy road. It was early in the morning. There was nobody there. And went down into the farmer's field and gone. He said, I just couldn't believe it. And that's when I first started putting things together, when you hear the story of gliding motion, where it's like, he said it would, some people say it walks like a skier, like it's gliding. You hear that a lot in a lot of reports, strange gliding motion, not all of them, but some of them. And, you go back and they'll go back and see right where we're standing or was walking and there's no prints. I just heard that description several times. So it just goes on and on. I mean, I met a hunter. He took me out in the woods where he had shot at one, and he said it was standing right in front of me. And I said I had my crosshairs right in its forehead. It was just standing there looking at me, like maybe 50, 60 feet from me. And he said I was terrified. He had just come back from Afghanistan. I think it was his first year back. And he said, I had my finger on the trigger and it was just looking at me. And he said, as I pulled my trigger, I moved my crosshairs up over its shoulder. And when I pulled the trigger, the bullet went right by its head. I purposely missed it. Something told me not to shoot this thing. And he said, it tore right through the woods right here. And him and I walked it, and it looked like nothing had been through there. He said, I'm telling you, I swear to God, it was standing right here and it tore through the woods. And he said, I couldn't hear it. I couldn't hear any branches breaking, but it tore right through there. And him and I walked through there was no branches on the ground. Normally, if something 7 or 8 foot had gone through there, it would have made a trail. There was nothing there. And the guy couldn't explain it. And he called me out in the woods to show me. People just don't do that. They don't waste their time, waste my time to come out in the woods by himself. And there's only one area. He couldn't have been mistaken because there's only one T on the trail. And, just things like that happen all the time. And so many unusual reports. And it goes all over the place. I've taken reports of pterodactyls being spotted from a hunter in a place called Piedmont Wildlife Refuge, just east of Atlanta. And even though Atlanta is in North Georgia, you go anywhere east, west, or north of Atlanta, there's just lots of farmland out there. So the whole state of Georgia does not look like Atlanta. He says, I was sitting in my tree stand and I could see something flying. This is in the morning, but the sun was up. I could see just fine. And I saw what looked like a huge bird. It was headed right for me. He said it was like 20, 30 feet up in a stand, a big high stand. And he said, this thing came flying right above me. And he said, I looked up, he said, I could not believe what I'm looking at. He said, it looked like it had huge bat wings, a long tail with a bulb at the end of the tail, a great big head with a beak on it, and a big protrusion sticking out of his head. He said, I knew what it was, and I was looking at it, and I couldn't believe what I was, and it was flapping its wings. So this thing wasn't like a kite or anything. And so I've dactyl reports as well up here in North Georgia. And there's just so much more going on in our forest than just Bigfoot sightings. There's dogman, flying reptiles, but lots and lots of strange things going on in the woods around us.
Yeah, that is interesting. And what makes you believe these people, other than the demeanor that they show, their reaction, them crying? What personally makes you believe that this is going on?
Oh, and that's a great question too. Like you can read an email from somebody or a text from somebody, or you can read a book. But when you're standing in front of a guy or telling a story, or you're on the phone with, I always try to get in front of the person if I can, but if they're in another or it's far away, I can only do it over the phone. But normally people don't waste your time. They might call and leave a funny voicemail, spend an hour on the phone going on and on about what they saw, and they go over and over the same details in case they miss something. So I think, and of course, when they're standing in front of me, the things I look for is is he looking me in the eye? Is the person that's with them, if he's not alone, Are they standing around, or are they all snickering somewhere? Is the witness looking at his watch all the time, like he's in a hurry to get out, or does this guy? And usually, what I get, believe it or not, 99.9% of the people I talk to, I don't see any evidence of deception. They'll go on and on and on about their story, and liars just don't do that. Liars don't go over and over and over and over it because they're afraid they're going to get caught on detail. A person that's telling the truth has no fear of that. They keep going over the same details just in case they miss something. So, and when you get to be, I'm 62, when you get to be my age and raised kids and had many jobs, it's not that hard to spot a liar. You can usually spot them. And I'm honest to God. I think maybe other than the funny emails and comments that are obviously fakes, I just don't remember standing in front of too many people I didn't believe. And that's not because I think everybody is telling me the truth, but no, most people don't want to go eye to eye and toe to toe with a researcher, face to face, and then try to BS them. It just doesn't happen as often as you think it might.
Yeah, that's true. And do you ever have people that, I don't know, sound off and they are off, per se?
Sound off and are off, as in like they're not fully, their back faculties aren't completely there.
Yeah, for example, like they'll email you, tell you like this giant story, and when you try to get them to contact you or meet up with you, they like dodge you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Oh yeah. I get a few of those every year. Let me tell you, I had a guy from Maryland
Mm.
contact me a couple of years ago, and he had these stories. Oh my Lord. And they were so crazy that from the beginning, I was like, this guy's full of it. He would send me, send me emails. And I'm trying to remember if I talked to him on the phone. I talked to so many people, I remember. I can't remember if I talked to this guy on the phone, but I think he used to email or text me. And these we saved a family. This is how, for instance, we saved a family of Sasquatches. My vet friends and I pulled together. I found this family. They befriended me on a place I used to cut firewood. And and then I had some government guys come into this area. They knew they were there. They were threatening me. And then my buddies and I, we had to get this family into a trailer, move them to a different part. Uh, I'm like, read this guy. Are you out of your mind? Do you actually think that I'm gonna that I think Sasquatch, a family needs you to a different part of the woods because these FBI guys are looking for them? I just didn't believe it. But it went on for years. This guy would email me stuff. And I finally called him. Usually I didn't even answer the guy. And I finally called him out and I said, look, man, if you don't send me something other than all these stories, if you're going to have to send me something better than this, either a foot, he wanted me to come up there, but my God, it was like a 12-hour drive or something to get up there. And of course, I didn't feel good about going out with the woods with a guy I already didn't trust in case he took me up on it. And then he got all bent out of shape. And I thought I could trust you. And apparently, you can't. This is why I can't trust anybody. Didn't make his story any more valid, but that's just for instance about some of the people we get. And there are some people out there that are lonely
Mm-hmm.
and they make up things. And it doesn't take long that I don't think they're actually trying to purposely trick you. I think what it is that they're just hoping they need something in their life. So I don't look at them like, they're just trying to BS me. I think they're just looking for somebody to buy into their story because they need somebody to. So I kind of feel sorry for them. I don't bash them publicly. There's just some people out there like that.
Right. Yeah, I've noticed the same with my research. It's just certain people that tell you these encounters and they just keep replaying it in their mind with a lot of detail and their story never changes. You know they're telling the truth. And then there's other people that you can kind of tell they're seeking attention and they don't really want to go too far into it and show you where the area is and just
Right.
get right into it. You know, when somebody's telling the truth because they're like, come out right now, I'll show you. And as soon as you come out there, it's the same story they told you on the phone and they just keep, telling the same story. So you know when you know.
Yep.
Okay.
We do.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to tell you, we do a lot of investigations. I've got, I don't know, oh my God, I don't know how many cameras I have, how many trail cameras, and I've set them up, and I've got a tree where a hiker, not too far from me. I mean, from where I'm sitting right now, it might be, as the crow flies, 9 miles to this tree. But to drive there, I have to go above it and below it. I got to go zigzag pattern, get there over the mountain. And he saw a young Sasquatch. He was hiking. He was a hiker from Florida, and as he gets to this part of the trail, he's looking at his map and he's cursing because the trails are so poorly mapped up here. You go to Florida, man, the trails maps are pretty good. You come up here to Georgia, like you're in a spot, you're like, well, where does this trail go? Why isn't this trail over here? Oh, it's terrible. You get turned around lost on a trail up here so easy. And so he's looking at his map and he's cursing. He's like, where in the heck does this trail go? Is this it over here? And then he's got a dog with him. And his dog alerts dead ahead. He's looking at his dog and his dog's looking at a tree. And he looks back at his dog. He's like, what's wrong? And he says, David, I swear to God, I thought somebody lost their chimpanzee. This thing stands up on a limb and walks across this limb and jumps down into the hole of this tree. And he says, I'm sitting there looking at it thinking, did I just see? He said, I didn't even think Bigfoot or Sasquatch. I thought somebody lost their chimpanzee. It was about the size of a chimp. It was about 4 feet tall, except it walked across the limb on 2 legs with long arms. And he says, then it popped its head out of the hole in the tree. There's a big hole in the crux of the tree. Popped its head up, looked at him to see if he was still there, and then ducked its head back down again. He's like, holy mackerel. And then it pops his head up again to see if he's there. And then pops his head back down in the hole in the tree. So now he's like, oh, heck, I'm going to get a picture of this thing. Is this what I think it is? So he's digging around for a couple of rocks, finds a couple of rocks, and he tosses a rock up there at it to try to get poke its head up so he can get a picture of it with his phone. And as soon as he threw that rock, something went nuts about 60 yards up the trail. Something, he said it looked like something had grabbed this pine tree and was shaking it back and forth. It was like there was a hurricane over one tree. But he said, I knew something must have been shaking this tree back and forth. He said, I turned around and headed down the trail with my dog, not running because I've been trained not to run away from an animal. He said, we were walking fast, and whatever this thing was flanking us the whole way. It was up in the trees, and it was picking up stuff and screaming at us, and every rock and branch, it was just a shower of them all the way to my car, almost a mile back to my car. This thing stayed with us. He said, I never got a chance to see it. It was over the 4th of July weekend. Everything is completely leafed up here on 4th, by July. He said, not until I could see my car did this thing ease up. And me and my dog got in my car and we got the hell out of there. So he told me where the tree was at. And I didn't think there was any chance I was going to find the tree, but he described it so well. And he gave me some good enough landmarks where even I had never been on this trail. I was able to find that tree myself. Another investigator, my wife, went up there. And I've got 4 cameras on this tree, hoping that either this thing comes back and puts his kid up there, or another family knows about this tree. It's a very unique tree. And it's got this big branch, huge branch. It's bigger around than I am, that goes off this tree. And there's this huge hole in this tree where something could conceal itself. I have already bought tree climbing gear to try to get up in this tree, but it's such a bizarre tree where there's nothing to grab onto. It just goes up and then curves, and it's on a super steep slope. And I got those linemen's climbing spikes and a harness. And my wife was like, David, you are not going up there. And the more I thought about it, I thought, man, I like to get up there and get some hair samples, get some tape, run it in that hole. There's hair in there. Nothing's jumping in and out of that hole without leaving all that hair. I can see from the ground, even though it's probably 40 feet up. I guess it's about 40 feet up. Doesn't sound high. You're standing at the base of that tree looking up 40 feet on a slope where there's nothing to grab. Even if you get up there, you still have to climb on that curve. I don't know how you would transition up there. Anyway, so I have 4 cameras on that tree, and I go up there about once every 2 months, change all the cameras out, or change all the batteries and put fresh camera cards in there, hoping it'll come back. Nothing has come back yet, but and I've got cameras up on Rich Mountain behind us, and my wife gives me a hard time about putting cameras on. She goes, "You know, these things know that just don't show up on cameras," and we all know that. We all know that the chance of getting a photo or video on them, which I set all mine to video, is so slim. But there's a little voice in there that tells you that if you don't, you're guaranteed not to get anything. If you don't do anything, if you just don't put any cameras out, then you're guaranteed not to get any pictures. And I would not, if I ever got a good video or picture of one, it's not for me. I would, I would, I want it so that I've got something for witnesses, for their families. You see this photograph? This is what your brother saw. This is similar to what your aunt saw. So this is for all the people that have taken a beating over the head all the years, uh, laughed at by the coworkers. That really, so if I got proof it's not for me, it's for validation for all the witnesses out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So this creature jumped into the tree.
Yeah, and when I got there, I was wondering if what I had to see this tree. That's why I had to see it. And when I saw the hole in the tree, I realized it was just a normal hole in the tree, and I can only assume that it was a place, just a good hiding place. So it's just this really weird. I'll send you a picture of it. I got pictures of it on my phone. It's just this really strange shaped tree with this massive hole. Well, it's almost big enough for me to get into it, I think. That's how big this hole in this tree is, like a cavity in this tree. It's very, very unique. I've gotten a drone up there a couple of times, but there's so many branches up high. I'm afraid I'm gonna lose my drone up there. So I haven't been able to get there high enough for the drone to like actually land it up there and look in this hole. But it's a challenge, and it's neat. I like it.
Yeah, very cool. And
Hmm.
have you ever heard any reports of the orbs being associated with Sasquatch or Bigfoot turning into an orb or vice versa?
I have not personally myself, but that doesn't mean anything. But I do know other investigators that have. Now we've taken several UFO reports up here, but there is no doubt that these orbs, even though I don't have any experience so far with orbs, I absolutely know and believe it that there is a connection. The little blue orbs, I've just heard it so many times from other investigators that yeah, there is a connection.
Okay. What about Sasquatch being connected with aliens and UFOs?
Wow, what a great question! And you know what? I wish somebody would ask that question more often. Um, when uh, there was in the Chestnut Ridge, Stan Gordon, that's his name, Stan Gordon, great investigator. He put that book together, Silent Invasion. Great book. And then Seth Breedlove did a documentary on it, and it was specifically about that. Bigfoot in association reported with UFO encounters. And then, so it was always in the back of my mind when I first started out on this. And then when I heard people talking about Bigfoot being, not touching the ground, like levitating, this gliding factor, and then you start listening to alien encounters and the Pascagoula incident, those aliens were doing the exact same thing. They were hovering, moving along the ground, but they weren't touching the ground. Just saw another one um, that happened, I think, in Missouri, as a matter of fact, or it was moving and it was not touching the ground. And I thought, what a connection that is. That Bigfoot and aliens are both reported to be moving along the ground, but not ever actually touching the ground. And of course, when you hear so many stories about Bigfoot with glowing red or yellow eyes, glowing. Now, I'm not talking about eye shine. I'm talking about not a reflection. I'm talking about actual eyes glowing like from within. There is no animal in the world, let alone a mammal, that can see at night with glowing eyes. So if that doesn't tell you that this thing has some sort of unearthly origins, like, then I don't know what to tell you. And of course, people just want to associate eye shine with just with headlights or a flashlight, when many of them in fact do not um, include a light source. The light source is coming from the eye. So yeah, so I think you have to. I've heard UFO reports come into the museum, but I myself have not taken a UFO and a Bigfoot report together. But I know Stan Gordon in Pennsylvania has, and he wasn't even asking for it. He was just a UFO investigator. So there's a lot of good investigators out there that are cross branching because they have to. They're getting the reports in.
Yeah, very interesting. So there are organizations, Bigfoot researchers that try to hide this type of information. Why is that?
I don't. I tell you, I don't think they're trying to hide it. I think what it is, they're afraid to talk about it because they don't want to be. They don't want to be ostracized by their fellow researchers, and I think that fear of ridicule even goes with amongst the researcher field, amongst the researchers themselves. And it's like if they don't stick to this false gigantopithecus narrative, they're afraid they won't get invited to be a speaker, or they won't get in. They might. They're going to get ostracized behind. They're afraid to be people talking about their behind their back. But man, I'm after the truth here. And when you realize you're not the only one that is getting these kind of reports, you get strength from other researchers that can connect on Facebook or through email. I hope those researchers, and some of them are coming around. I don't want to call out any of them, but some researchers are coming around because they're starting to get dogman reports. And nothing will turn your head around faster than when you start getting dogman reports and you understand there's no gigantopithecus theory in the world that can explain a 7 foot, half man, half canine animal that can run at impossible speeds, that has glowing eyes, and that can transition from 4 to 2 feet. And I think that is really the keystone in Bigfoot uh, being a not a gigantopithecus theory. That's the keystone and that's why Bigfoot researchers are trying so hard not to look at the dogman phenomenon, because once they understand that it's really happening, they're blind. They're flying blind. They're so embedded in this giganto theory that dogman will throw them completely off center, and they'll probably realize that this whole narrative they've been pushing about this ancient missing link is false, and they wouldn't know where to go if they didn't have that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And throughout the years, I've heard of certain organizations just snipping out the strange parts. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's a real thing. As a matter of fact, when I first started this, I was an investigator with a well-known organization. And when I started getting reports from very good witnesses, like I would travel to their house and spend the night in a hotel, and they would take me to the place where it happened in broad daylight. Just great reports. And when they told me things like it had glowing eyes, or walked behind a tree and didn't come out the other side, or everything was believable and went along with the nerve until this thought was projected into his head. And he says, I was like 12 years old. Why would I think of this? I wasn't even interested in this kind of stuff. And all of a sudden this thing is putting these thoughts in my brains. Or it was or I took a dogman report. Excuse me. They wouldn't print it because they didn't print dogman reports. That's when I realized, well, what am I doing here? Are we looking for the truth, or are we pushing a false narrative? And that's the distinct impression I get after a couple of years. I started talking to other researchers that were in this organization, and I was meeting ex investigators that were still investigating. They just didn't do investigations for this specific organization. And they told me the same thing. They quit because they were getting bullied into dropping certain aspects of the stories, of the witnesses' stories, that they wouldn't include them. And they were disgusted as I was. So um, these things are reported, these strange aspects, but for fear of ridicule, or afraid that It's not going to sound science minded. They omit them. There's no doubt they omit them. I've lived through it myself.
Yeah, and do you think it's purely because they're afraid of being ostracized to the bottom, being ridiculed by friends, being divorced by their wife, or do you think that they do work for the government and possibly there's like, I don't know, different sections that they're working for personally? What do you think?
That's a great question. And I'll tell you, I think it could happen. I think there could be some government intrusion into some of these organizations, but I haven't got the impression from the people I talk to that they're just afraid. I don't know if they're so confident in our public education that we all pretty much got the same education. They're so confident they didn't waste their time, and that they're still going on the basis of what their high school biology teacher told them. That is what it's got to be. And I don't know, I don't understand the fear of that, of learning new things, and why you cling to that old stuff, even though what the real, I mean, let's face it, what they taught us at school, some teacher just read out of a book. Most of our teachers weren't in the field. They didn't do any real field work. They just went to school and somebody read a book to them, and that's what they're doing to you in school. And now you've got actual real witnesses that are out in the world telling you what they experienced and saw, but you want to go back to what they told you out of a book as to more believable than what a witness actually saw with his own eyes. So I,
Yeah.
I think there's some kind of a fear factor there, fear of the unknown, and fear of ridicule. So, but that would be my gut instinct tells me it's really more fear of ridicule, and they won't stand up. When probably somebody says, "I want you to do this," most of them, in order to be in the organization, well, okay, they'll do it. They'll trade in their they'll trade in their morals and their sense of honesty and integrity to remain in the organization. Where I'm not like that. I'll just tell you to take it, pound sand. I'm going to do the right thing no matter what anybody says.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I'm not the only one. Yeah, there's other investigators out there, so I'm not the only one. There's other investigators that are the same way, that they'll tell the truth, like Sabella Irwin and Carter Bouchard out there in California. That's just two off the top of my head.
Yeah, it makes sense. Most of the public doesn't even believe in Bigfoot. So if you just try to go at them with, invisibility, orbs, they're gliding, it might turn people off and maybe they're afraid of that. And it's very true about people reading things out of a book. You got some lady in a dress who never even fought in World War II, but she's reading what she heard, what she sees in this book, and that's fact. But the truth of the matter is she wasn't there. She doesn't know exactly what happened, and she's just telling us what she's reading.
Right. Exactly.
hmm And there's a lot of Bigfoot researchers. They're like the top Bigfoot researchers. They want to look like Indiana Jones or Steve Irwin and talk about Jane Goodall. But I think, this is more than just some lost primate. There's a lot more going on. And it's sad that the people that want to look like Indiana Jones are the main people behind the scenes or, in the public's eye.
Miguel, you really nailed it right there. You are so right, man. There is this public persona that they have to live up to, and and it's like but they're only going to regurgitate what you can handle, or maybe what they can handle. You're only going to hear what I can handle. And in my retort to the people that go, it's just this, it's just that. Then my retort to that is, can you explain to me how where these things go in the upper north part of the United States, North America, in the wintertime? Where do these primates go that don't wear any clothes, don't wear any skins? It's just a primate, like a monkey and gorilla, or like us, right? Where do they go when it's, pardon my language, when it's 20 degrees below zero? Where do they go when there's 6 and 8 foot snowdrifts? Where do they go when there's absolutely no vegetation and all the farms are closed because they're not growing anything, right? Do they all move south to Florida? Well, what if that happens? Then why don't the sightings go through the roof in Florida in the wintertime and in Alabama? Why don't we find mile-long tracks in the snow? We do find a few, but not like we should. If there's a population of 30 to 50,000 of these creatures in North America alone, why are we finding this stuff in the snow? right? And then people say, well, we don't find the bones because the porcupines and squirrels eat them. Man, I can walk in the woods anywhere up here, and I walk in any gift shop. There's all kinds of antler sheds. The porcupines and squirrels don't eat them all. And what happens to the bones in Florida? There are no porcupines in Georgia and Florida and Alabama. They're only in the northern part of the state. And the only time porcupines chew on bones and squirrels on bones is in the wintertime when they need certain minerals. They don't chew on that stuff in the summertime when the minerals are easy to find on the ground and in nature. So this whole thing, oh, they bury their dead. Well, let me tell you something, my friend. If they buried their dead, that would increase our chances of coming across a skeleton or some bones or some fossils. It wouldn't actually make it harder for us to. We dig them up because we're digging roads, we're digging for hotels, we're constantly digging. There's no way we could have a whole history of thousands of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years of Sasquatch evolution, and we can't dig up any of their relatives. That's ludicrous. So there is, and that's why the scientists, that's why the paleontologists and archaeologists will not look at this, because they know you cannot have families of primates that cover the globe. They're on every continent, and we don't have any fossils or skeletons. They understand the impossibility of that. We should have something. So that when you see, I mean, I think scientists would love to be on board with this and go looking for these things, but they instinctively know something is not right here. These things do not, they don't, they don't, they don't exist in the way that all other normal mammals and animals exist here. We should have truckloads of skeletons. These things should be in zoos. We should be, that's how many of them exist in the wild right now, all over the world. I talked to a lady that was on vacation in Italy. She's a wedding planner in Atlanta, and her two sons saw one crouched down in a vineyard in Italy, and it got up and ran across through the vineyard. And I mean, so that blew my mind. They're in Italy, and they're in England now. Here they're in Britain, in Scotland. There's sightings of these things for hundreds of years. They go back in Germany. Man, come on. So, they keep wanting to push this rare hominid that lives in Washington and Oregon, when in fact they're all over the place. They're in every state of the union, and they don't behave and die and leave the kind of sign, the kind of artifacts that any other hominid would. So I think the scientists know that, and that's why they shy away from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard many reports where people find these perfect tracks going into large fields in the snow, and they follow the stride, which is a giant stride, and all of a sudden the tracks just disappear. There's no trees, nothing else around, and it's just like something came and picked it up, or it just disappeared into thin air.
I've heard that myself, the same thing. Yep.
Mhm. So there's certainly something going on, and it's not just a physical creature. It's something interdimensional or paranormal, whatever you want to call it. But I
Hmm.
mean, I'm not going to say that the Indiana Jones people are wrong, because these things do rock throw. They do wood knock. They will charge
Right.
you. You know, they do things that primates do. But like you said, there's also this other aspect where they're gliding. Their eyes illuminate on their own without any intervention of light, and they just seem to know things that are impossible. They can hide behind a tree and just disappear.
Yep. I'll tell you. Um, I talked to a guy who saw one in, I think it was South Carolina. God, it was, and he was so moved by his sighting. He was fishing, and he had found this little honey hole. Well, I say honey because it wasn't like he had caught a lot of fish there, but he knew he could go there, and there wasn't going to be anybody else around there. It was a perfect little place to go fishing. So he'd found it once just hiking, and then he went in there with his fishing pole, and he gets in there, he's starting to fish, and he's not here very long, and he hears somebody walking up behind him. He's like, oh, he's so disappointed. Somebody else knew about this little spot. He just turns around, and walking into the little clearing behind him is this gigantic Sasquatch, And he said his hair was just blowing in the wind. He said this thing looks so clean. And I don't remember how many times he said this exact same thing. He kept saying, he said it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. He kept saying that. And I didn't get the impression that he knew if it was a male or a female. It just kept saying it was the most beautiful thing I ever saw. And it came in and it was looking at the sun. It was really early in the morning. And it was walking, it was actually looking up at the rising sun. And he said it stopped and it just stood there and kind of put its chest out. And it was just soaking in that morning. And he said I could see the steam coming off its hair, off the fur, off of its body as it stood there on two legs. And he said I was just absolutely amazed. And it didn't even know I was there. He said I put my pole down real easy and I started walking towards this thing. He said I wanted to get closer to it. And he says, I got closer to it. I stepped on some debris or branches and it had cracked. And this thing looked at me. And he said it went from this serene scene to where this thing was in like panic mode. He said, I didn't have a gun or anything. I didn't have anything in my hands. I had just laid my rod down. And he said it backed up against a tree. And these words were, it tried to camouflage into the tree. He said like that two or three times, it tried to camouflage. That's what he said. It tried to blend into the tree where I couldn't see it. But the tree behind it was too small. Its silhouette was way bigger than the tree. And when it didn't work, he said it took off and ran up this hill that it would have taken me 25 minutes. He said it was up at the top of this in 10 seconds. And when it got up to the top, it let out this bellowing scream. And he said, even though it screamed, I didn't leave. He said, I continued fishing because I wanted this thing to come back. I wanted to see it again. So I remember I've heard other stories, but I always remember that one guy saying it was trying to blend in with the tree. And I'm sure other investigators have heard stories like that, but yeah, it's pretty neat.
Yeah, the little juvenile that I seen here on my property, it was the he was the most little handsome thing I've ever seen. His hair was perfect. It looked like it'd been conditioned. It had like a shine to it. When the wind blew, you could see the hair follicles moving back around, like kind of like a blow dryer on low. And you could see just the hair moving around. But his eyes were so innocent. He had big round eyes that were white, and you could see the little black pupils. And he had like an overbite, like his two canines from the top were sticking down on his bottom lip. But I mean, he was a handsome little fella, and it was just like an amazing 7 seconds of my life. But I'll never forget it. Whenever he hid behind the tree, though, like he ducked down and dipped behind the tree, I was looking left and right of the tree, like expecting him to run off, kind of like a white-tailed deer, where you just see something haul butt through the woods. No, when he went behind the tree, that was it. Everything went silent, and he just disappeared. You didn't hear anything after that. You didn't see anything, and it's like, what the heck? He just pulled like some type of Houdini move and just vanished.
How fascinating is that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he had this large conical-shaped head, like the skulls that they find in Peru, like really elongated skull, but it had like a point at the top.
That is just absolutely fascinating. I just love that. Oh my gosh. And you know what? I've never seen one. I mean, I've seen two through a thermal. I've been around them when they were stomping up a hill, but I've never actually seen one through my eyes in the daylight. And I could almost, when you were describing that little one, I could almost see it standing. I'm out here in my front yard right now. You know, I have a little apple orchard, and I'm just looking out there, and I could actually see it the way you were describing it. And what an amazing, life-changing experience. You know, I talk to people that see them, but you've actually seen one up close, and I can't even imagine what that does to your heart. The kind of passion that instills in your heart to find the answers. And it was a little one. So it wasn't like, I meet lots of people that see big ones and they're scared. It's not a interesting thing. It's a horrifying thing because it was screaming at them or they thought it was going to kill them. So you're lucky to have a nice, peaceful encounter with a young one.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I said whenever I seen it was, my God, they are real. And I remember saying that to myself, like, my God. And then I remember watching this interview with Bob Gimlin, and whenever he said he saw Patty, he said, "My words were this: My God, they are real." And I was like, "What?
Well,
That's exactly what I said." So I knew he was telling the truth.
all right.
Yeah, it blew my mind.
Something. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it literally blows your mind. Like you can say that all the time. Oh, this blows my mind. This blows my mind. But that will, like, it's a literal like term. It will really blow your mind.
how long ago did you see yours?
It was in 2019 in July.
Okay.
I don't know the
Uh,
exact date, but
yeah.
I know it was in July.
And have you found? I'm not trying to psychoanalyze or anything, but I'm just curious.
hmm
Have you found that your life is still quite normal, or do you find that do you have, I don't know, is it taken over your life? Let's just say that.
Oh, it certainly has. It's something I think about all the time. But
Mm.
before I had these encounters, my life was just like in a negative state. It was everything was going wrong. So whenever I seen these things, it was actually a positive thing because I knew that there was more to life than what I was experiencing, and it helped me move through the negativity that I was going through.
There's a lady, and I can't remember what her name was, but she said, and it's funny you should say that because I didn't have a lot of negativity in my life, but it was kind of chaotic my life before I got into this Bigfoot thing. And this lady, she coined this phrase. She said, some people go looking for Sasquatch and they end up finding themselves. And I think it gives you the passion gives you this. It really narrows your focus, I think is what it is. And since you're not chasing something that's like a fifth of alcohol or drugs, you're chasing something that actually takes you into the woods, a very peaceful place that I think it can be therapeutic for a lot of people. It was for me, and it really did change my life. I streamlined and simplified my life, and I think for a lot of people, like looking for these things, bring some peace in your life. It has to me. So, and I hope it has. Because I know it. If that lady said that, and I read about a lot of other people who and talk about hear about a lot of other people whose lives were changed for the positive because of this. Um, I'm glad to hear that it was a positive thing for you because I hear the other side, right? I hear guys that have seen one and try so hard to convince their wife, or worse, the wife sees it, tries to convince her husband, and they won't believe him, and it actually causes their marriage to dissolve.
Yeah,
I've
absolutely.
heard it, and then they lose their job. It's like, oh, it's
Yeah.
sad. It's
hmm
very sad.
They'll never
Uh,
go into the woods again. They give up
oh
hunting,
yeah,
and they get like PTSD. Yeah, there's a lot of
yes.
negative effects to it too. So people have to be careful what they wish for, what they want to see. And if your life's going good, maybe you don't need to see one. But I mean, if you're lost and broken, maybe it'll help you.
I think you're right. I think it's different for a lot of people, but I don't know. I want to say for the most part, it's for the positive, but I've met a lot of people. It's a crapshoot, right? And maybe it's the kind of person you are too, um, which dictates what kind of a encounter you're going to have. I don't
Yeah,
know, but
I
it's
think
an
if
interesting thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're already in the mindset that you're being lied to, there's a lot of information that's being withheld. You're into aliens and ancient history, all those things, and you see a Sasquatch. I think it confirms what you were speculating. But if you're somebody who, goes to work every day and you believe everything you see on the media, and everything is as it seems, and you see one, I think it really breaks you down mentally, and it's hard to file that information in your brain when you see a Sasquatch.
Yeah, you are so right. I had a guy who saw one who I'm sure there's other ones through my past, but this one particular guy, I will never forget him. He saw one and it upset him so bad. He must have been that kind of guy that just believed everything that his teacher in school told him was right. That after he saw it, that he would pile all the furniture up against the doors, his front and back door, every night before he went to bed, so this thing could not get into his house. That's how bad it was for this guy. And I think that this was in Georgia. It was a guy I talked to, and talk about messing up your life. I mean, holy cow! Couldn't even go to sleep unless he piled the furniture up against the doors. So yeah, yeah, there's a lot of negativity in there, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's bad. I mean, if you can't talk to other people and you're able to tell your wife or your family and they believe you, I think that's good enough.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So, what other encounters have you heard that are significant? Something that stuck to your mind. It doesn't even have to be the paranormal ones. Is there anything crazy that's happened?
Well, I'll tell you, there's probably 50 of them, and we don't have the time to go over all of them. But I'll tell you one that's that not only solidifies that we're dealing with something that actually can come right into right into small towns. These things don't show up way out in the way out in the remote regions. People see them out there, but they see them right in small town America as well. And and I think the telling part is that when once you call the police, what happens? So you have two aspects. You see one, and then what happens later when you see either nothing happened with the police or the police hush it up, or a police officer sees it and he's told to hush up. Then this whole thing takes on another kind of feeling where you're like, oh my God, not only are these things real, but they know they're real, and they're told to shut up. So I was contacted by, I had to be very vague about this, the whereabouts of it. I was contacted by a previous EMT person, and she said that that the police knew about this guy. I want to tell you his name. It was in the state of Georgia. I will tell you that. And the police had been called to his property a couple times because he was shooing kids off. He was yelling at kids to get off his property. He was setting booby traps on his property, and he was yelling at the kids because he didn't want the kids, neighborhood kids, to get hurt on his property on one of these booby traps. And this guy was a trapper. He used to trap animals. So one night, the neighbors called the police again, saying there's a god awful noise coming from this guy's house. There's a little cabin, and they can hear screaming going on. So police respond, and this female paramedic comes to the is dispatched as well. And we get out of the car, and there is something in the woods next to this guy's driveway screaming at them, inhuman screams, and the police are hiding behind their cars with their weapons drawn. And no one they're all afraid to go into the house, but they know they need to get in the house. But this thing has got them pinned down on their cars, screaming, hollering at them. Finally, it moves off, and the police and this EMT driver get into the house to a scene they said that they have never seen before. Something had come into the house and picked up this big man and beat him to death off the walls of his own house. All the way down the walls, blood bashed into, I don't know if there was drywall, but there's just evidence where you could see this something had picked him up and just smashed him off the walls of his house. He was beat to a pulp and blood all over the walls. So they took the report. The EMTs got this guy, his body out, and she said we have behind the dispatch. There's all these copies of every single report for every month, through the month into the year, and they're all filed up behind the desk, all of them for every year. And she goes, when I retired, I looked up there to get a copy of that, and that book was gone. That was the only book that was missing. Somebody had taken that whole month of book out of there. It was the only one that was missing. And I thought that was very telling. She goes, that just doesn't happen. You just don't lose reports. You just don't lose a whole book of reports like that. But somebody had redacted that I don't know if it was the week or the month or what it was, but it was a group of reports of that specific time that was gone. And that one stuck with me because she gave me the address. She goes, I know the address because it's right down the house from where I live. She goes, I'm in the same community. And she said, it's still vacant. and that was before COVID had hit. So I would love to go down to that property. I know this. She said it has not been sold. There's still no trespassing signs on it. And I've had other people contact me,
Yeah.
similar stories that where they're on their property
Mm.
and they have weapons with them, even to check the mail. You come on down. I'm like, nah, nah, nah. I got a wife and grandkids, and I am not about to go out and die for these things. I'm not gonna go out and lay my life down for this. But yeah, that was one of the interesting that like not only, and this is not the only time this has happened where I've spoke to a witness that worked for the city or the state, and that specific work was missing. That's not the first time. I've heard other reports as well. So it's yes, they're real. Yes, the police respond to it, but then they just the evidence for this sighting disappears.
Yeah, that's a frightening report right there.
Yep.
And I took a report from a sheriff here in Missouri, and we talked about his encounter. He told me everything that happened, and then I never heard from him again. I reached out to him and just never heard anything. So I waited like 6 months, and then I messaged him back, and we talked again, and he ended up telling his encounter story on the channel. And basically, he was working with the K9 unit, driving down a chalk road through a conservation area, and this large white Sasquatch walked in front of his police vehicle. And it went into the field, and it's a large field. And it started running halfway after he hit it with the spotlight and went into the conservation area. But man, you can really tell that that encounter really affected him. And he told me that in Farmington, Missouri, there's a geothermal observatory, like satellite observatory, and they know all about Sasquatch. They watch them from satellites, and basically they keep it a secret from the public. And this is the first time I've
No,
ever spilled the beans
that's
on
a
it.
isn't that amazing? Holy cow!
Mm-hmm.
And then we've all heard reports that and we all come on, the governments they're not dumb. They know these things are out there, and they have to ask yourself if it's just a normal regular creature like they're telling you it is. What? Why hide it? Think of if what they've done with the spotted owl and other endangered species. They could grab control of more forests. Think of the control they could exert over us. Oh, we've got these wild people. Yeah, you can't go on there. You got to have a special, but they don't. And it's not because they don't want you to know they're real. It's because they don't want you to know what they are. That's the secret. It's not that they're real. It's what they are. That's why
Mm-hmm.
the authorities clamp down on this because yes, they know they're real. And if there's so much, come on, the evidence is so overwhelming. I look at people that go, you know, well, these things can't be real. I'm like, do you live under a rock? You know, I mean, just a cursory examination of the evidence would make you just a little. You're not going to get it on NBC nightly news, but if you did a little bit of just a tiny bit of reading, you'd understand how many people see them and what kind of people see them. And you would question that, right? That silly, goofy thing of they're not real. Uh, that thing was a costume. I mean, you just come on. But why? Why would they hide that from us? And you don't have to dig very deep to understand they're hiding something from us, not them. In
Mm-hmm.
my opinion, my gut is telling me, screaming at me, that what they're hiding is their origins. That if we figured out who they were, we might figure out who we are. Like we did not, and this is just my opinion, might be unpopular for some people, but I think that the Gigantopithecus, that thing was made up so that we would still swallow the evolutionary story. But in my opinion, the reason the Dogman thing throws a wrench in it all is if Dogman's real, then evolution is BS. Are there slight changes in species? Sure, but do they change from a salamander to a mammal to a horse to a bear to a person? No, that doesn't happen. So I think he would throw it all. It would throw a wrench in the works, and That's why I think they're clamping down on this, because if we figure out who they are, then we'd figure out who we are.
Yeah, that's a very good point. They don't care
Mhm.
that we know Bigfoot exists. They don't want us to figure out what they truly are.
That's exactly right, my friend.
hmm And with the sheriff, you could tell that the Bigfoot encounter that he had really affected him. But to know that the people he's working for know exactly what's going on and they won't tell anyone, it makes you could tell he was questioning why he worked for that place, like what he was even doing. What else have they lied to him about? Like it really affected him.
Miguel, that is such an important phrase you just used. What else are they lying about? Right?
hmm
If we figure out that they're lying about Bigfoot, somebody might ask the question, pose the question to somebody. Well, what else are you not telling us? Oh, so that's why I always, other people have me said that Bigfoot is holding the key to Pandora's box, and they cannot let this thing open. This Bigfoot open up this box, because once it opens up, Dogman's coming out, Mothman's coming out, Goat Man's coming out, all this crazy weird stuff that people are seeing for years, and they've been trying to suppress. It's all coming out with Bigfoot. Bigfoot ain't coming out by himself. That's why they got to keep this thing clamped down.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when
Yeah.
they're there to serve and protect. They're the hero. You help people. And to find out you're actually suppressing the truth, you're lying to people, it really changes things for you, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. I listened to the Martin Grove story that happened over in the land between LBL, land between the lakes in Kentucky, back in the, I think, early '90s. I think it happened. And after he had his encounter, him and his friend, with two or three dogmen, and one of them had killed another hunter just up the road from where they were hunting. And that was bad enough, that how they kept these things at bay until they got in their truck and just tore out or left their campsite. But then what happened later? What happened? How the police treated them? They're not just about the police, but they were both police officers. How their fellow sheriffs and police officers treated them, how the park department threatened them with their jobs. That was the most revealing part. And how I mean, Dogman was going to kill him, but these guys were going to ruin their reputation, and they were going to lose their job and their pension. They got it from both sides. So yeah, a lot of people. It just cracks me up, the people that think that they're waiting on the government for disclosure. I'm like, bud, you're gonna die. You're gonna die waiting for that to happen. You're gonna have to do it yourself, because it's not gonna happen. The government disclosure is just not gonna happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about we, the people, and the people are speaking up about this, and nobody cares. I mean, police officers, they are people. Military, they are people. Government
That's right.
officials, they're just regular people. They put on, one pant leg at a time. We're all people. So if they're waiting for somebody with a suit and tie and makeup to tell them the truth, then they're going to be waiting a long time.
Well, that's right, my friend. Long time. So that's about all I got for you.
Okay, I appreciate it. And do you have a website for the Bigfoot Museum?
We do have a website, but I post a lot of the more unusual stories I get on our Facebook page, Expedition Bigfoot. And don't let people don't get confused with the TV show. We don't have any affiliation with the TV show. But if you just go to Expedition Bigfoot, our Facebook page, and you scroll through there, there's so many things. Other witnesses send me encounters. I tell you what, I love to follow the Australian Yowie organization, and because it hasn't been infected with this Gigantopithecus thing, they're just kind of telling it like it is. There are so many amazing stories that happen on the Yowie Hunters channel out of Australia. Glowing eyes. I just posted a run recently, running 55 miles an hour. Same things that happen here.
Mm-hmm. Are
Um,
those the
but
guys
they're
that captured him on thermal, hiding behind like the stump or the log? There's like two of them, and they hid.
Yes, I think so. And there's two or three different organizations in Australia. And I'm not sure if that was the Yowie Hunters
Mm-hmm.
or Yowie Witnesses. I can't really remember. I follow them all, but I can't remember which one that is. But I know which one you're talking about. I think that's Stonewall or something like that. His name is.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of handpick the ones that people send me, or I see that have a ring of familiarity to what we're experiencing here in the United States. I don't share them all, but uh, I just shared one, I think, just like last week. So if you go to our Facebook page, there's all kinds of stories about strange encounters that from witnesses here in Georgia, North Carolina, Florida as well. So you might find that interesting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I was blown away whenever I seen that in Australia they're experiencing the same activity. And it's stuff that I experienced here on my property, like where they camped at, they went back and there was like sticks poked into the ground in the middle of the trails. And I'm like, man, that's exactly what I experienced out here at my place. So I knew they were telling the truth. They weren't just making things up. And this is somewhere that's all the way across the world.
That's right. All across the world, Australia, they have them in Japan, in China, obviously as well. They have them in China, and oh my God, they just show up. They just show up everywhere. When you really start understanding the history of these things, how far they go back, it's amazing. But I like to follow the ones. They're more organized, it seems like, in Australia, and of course, it helps if they speak our language. So that's a big help too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about Australia, China, Russia, Vietnam, Europe,
Yep.
even like in Spain and
Yep.
United States. I'm sure there's stuff going on in like Mexico and South America. You just don't hear about it as much.
Yeah, I just took a report from a fellow who saw one in Mexico, and another thing we didn't touch on was the sightings of Bigfoot on islands like New Zealand and Japan and the Philippines. All have a history of Bigfoot sightings. Of course, they don't call them Bigfoot; they had different names for them, but they go back even further in time than the sightings here in North America. So that's what I like to ask: how can they be on islands? And if they are on islands, where's the fossil? Where's the skeletal evidence? How do you hide it on an island that doesn't have porcupines to eat their bones? So, of course, they'll come up. They'll come up short on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. There might be a connection between Bigfoot and the giants and ancient hominid and primate skulls that they've found. Maybe a lot of the ancient primates that they label off as something else is actually Bigfoot. It's hard to say.
Hard to say, my friend.
Okay, David. Well, I appreciate you for sharing all the information that you did, the reports, and the truth about the subject. I think it's extremely important that people know what's really going on. And sure, there's a lot of people out there that don't even believe in Bigfoot, but they don't have their foot in the door. They haven't dived down into the rabbit hole like we have. And once you do, you truly find out what is going on. But it's hard to do that even for an average researcher that doesn't ever experience anything. I know there's a lot of people that go out there and camp. They just really want to experience the activity or see one, but you can't really gauge it until you experience it for yourself or you look at somebody dead in the eye and you see them cry whenever they tell their encounter.
But we are brothers of a different mother, my friend. Let me tell you something. I'm with you 100%. You just took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that's very important to me. And I think one day the public will know what's going on. And it's only a matter of time.
And it won't be from the government. It'll be from some farmer who had a webcam or had a trail camera or got a great video from from the road or from what. It's just going to be some average Joe that's going to get it. It won't be the government.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Some cowboy.
Yep. That's it, my friend. Or the phone. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you have anything else you'd like to share?
I don't think so, other than I love to watch your channel, and I love that you have nice, different guests that touch on interesting aspects of the phenomenon, not just the same old monkey chasing stuff. I don't have time for that stuff. And I think it's channels like you that are pushing the boundary closer to the truth, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And like I said, I appreciate you for being a guest on the show. And anytime you ever want to come back on, just let me know, and I'd be glad to have you on as a guest.
Will do, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, and you have an excellent evening.
You too, buddy. Bye bye.
All right, bye. All right, David, thank you for being a guest on Sasquatch Theory, and it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and it was very intriguing hearing about all the reports that you have accumulated throughout the years, and the Sasquatch Museum is an awesome place to be, so I highly recommend that people visit Expedition Bigfoot, the Sasquatch Museum in Blue Ridge, Georgia, because it is so cool being in there. There is so much evidence, and people always ask, if Bigfoot exists, where is the evidence? Show me some evidence. Well, you haven't visited Expedition Bigfoot, and there is a ton of evidence in there that's been collected throughout the years. So if you don't know, you just don't know. So don't ridicule other people, and the evidence is there, and there has been people that have been looking for answers, and just some people don't know. I mean, it's not their fault, but if you're uneducated on the subject, don't ridicule other people. It's not just the skeptics that are ridiculing people. There are also Bigfoot researchers and organizations that will try to downplay the strangeness that is occurring on this planet. And I think it's just a belief. People that want to believe that it's an unknown primate species and it makes them look more professional. But the truth is, no one really knows what's going on, and you just have to remain open-minded. But yeah, David, I really appreciate your time. And if you guys can, please support the channel by subscribing and leave a comment down below. Take care, everyone.